Hello and welcome to another Loco Works Wednesday video from oorail. You're probably wondering why I've got half a blue Pullman up here. Well, in today's video we're just going to give you a quick tip on how to troubleshoot the Bachmann Pullman locomotives. So this particular set is pretty expensive. It comes in a couple of different liveries. The one here is the original Pullman blue with the yellow ends. When this train originally came out, it was in a completely blue livery. So this one is a slightly later version, but prior to the last livery it had, which was the sort of inverse blue and gray. So one of the problems I've found, this particular locomotive is model is DCC, and so it works okay going back and forth between DCC and DC, but it's a complex train. It's also very expensive, so you don't want to mess around with it too much. So I try to keep it on a layout as much as I can. Now, one of the problems that I run into is that every so often, especially if I move it from one side of the layout to the other, where I have the DCC controller, what can happen is it just simply only half works. And so it'll sit there, you can hear it spin up as one of the motors is spinning up, but the other motor doesn't spin up and it just doesn't work. So I thought I'd go through the troubleshooting steps for when this happens, because it's usually not a real big problem. It's usually an electrical connection or it's an issue with one of the trains. So the interesting thing about the design, about the way Bachmann went around this, is that it's actually two trains that are connected together. So you have the kind of A section, which consists of two dummy coaches and the actual train, and then you have the B section that also has a powered train and two coaches, and they basically have a interconnect in the middle here at between the two dummy coaches. So the best way to troubleshoot this is to actually break the train in half, which is exactly what I've done here. So this is the first half of the train. Actually, it's the second half of the train. It's D, E, and F. If you look real carefully, if I move the train up a little bit, you should be able to see it in the camera there. This little letter there on the side, which is F, and then this one here is E. It might be a little tricky to see that. And one here at the end is D. So what I normally do when I'm moving this from one side of the layout to the other, if I haven't run it in a while, is I will split the train in two and just make sure that the lights work in the coaches and that the train itself is working. So you can see here that it's working fine, and I've got lights in all sections of the carriages. Now, if I didn't have lights in the D carriage here, for example, I would check the electrical connection between the two here. So the first thing to do is check to make sure that it moves, which it does. If it doesn't move, then you're going to have to probably make sure that the DCC decoder on it's okay. And a couple of times I've had to actually open this up, drop in the DCC blanking plate, run it around a few times, it's fine, drop the decoder back in, and it seems to work. So it seems to be a little temperamental, but once it gets going, it seems to be fine. So assuming it moves and you've got lights in the first one, then you want to check to make sure that you have lights in the second coach here, which is coach E. If you don't have lights in this, then you're more than likely going to want to look at the electrical connection here. It's just one of these typical Bachmann bar connections, so the connection can sometimes be a little dicey here, so this is a good point of reference to check. But if you've got lights there and you don't have lights in the last coach, then you're more than likely want to look at this. Now, if you don't have lights in the actual train itself, then you've got some problem wiring or electrical wise in here. So if it's moving and you have no lights, and you have no lights down here, it's obviously some kind of wiring issue that you want to check out, or it could be an issue with your DCC decoder. So this first part is working okay. So I'm going to run it around the track and actually run this in as an individual train, and then I'm going to move it over to the other side of tracks, and then we'll run the the second train around to make sure it works okay as well. Alright, so I'm going to get this run in and we'll continue the video in a few minutes. Okay, so the train's been running for a couple of minutes. You can see there it's picked up speed. So at this point, I'm going to reduce the speed on the DC controller just a little bit, just to let it burn in some more, or run in. So. And that's typically the process with this. You probably want to run this in for about 5 to 10 minutes if it hasn't been run for a while. And as you run it longer, it'll start to pick up speed. And that's just the motor re-embedding. And so once it gets to kind of a steady state, and you don't have to keep readjusting the power down to get the train to run at normal speed, you're good to go. So I'm going to let this run for probably another couple of minutes, and then we'll get rolling with the other part of the train. Alright, so you can see what I decided to do rather than wait for the other train to finish running in. I realized I had taken a train off the track here, so I put the other half of the Pullman here on the spare track. So you can see here, if I pull the train, oops, not one. If I pull the train back just a little bit, you can see this one is lettered A and B. And if I pull it forward here a little bit, you can see this one is lettered C. So it's the same as the other half of the train. You've got your powered locomotive, and you got your two unpowered coaches, and it's the same drill. You can see there I'm still not having any problems with that. Well, I'm going to get some more power. You can see here that the loco itself, you want to check to make sure it's lit, it's moving obviously, and that the inside coach lights are up. If it's not moving, then you want to look at the decoder and the pickups. If it is moving and you don't have lights, you want to look at the wiring in the decoder. If you got lights here and it's moving and you're good to go there, this is with the DC controller. Then you want to move on to the B coach. And with the B coach, you just want to make sure that you have lighting here. There is no lighting in the other half of the train, so you don't have to worry about that. There is some ambient lighting, but that is coming from over here. It's supposed to just be the corridor. And like I said in the previous part of the video, if you've got no lighting in the B coach, then you want to check the connection from here to here. If you do have no lighting in the B coach, but you have lighting in the C coach, then obviously there's power coming from the locomotive through the B coach into the C coach. So if you got lights in the C coach, you got no lights in the B coach, then it's not likely to be one of these connectors, but it's more likely to be a problem with the LEDs or whatever they've got going on here inside the B coach. And then obviously if you've got lights in the B coach and no lights in the C coach, then your problem is more than likely going to be this connector here. If it's not that connector and you've ruled that out, then you got to try and make sure that it's not an issue with the C coach itself, like LEDs or something like that. I haven't done it in a while, but I'm pretty sure you can connect the C coach to the A locomotive. I'm pretty sure that the connections will allow you to do that. So you can always test that out. And you can also swap out the C coach with the D coach on the other loco, and just make sure that you've got the ruled out the wiring and so on if it's a problem. But Luckily for me today, it seems to be wanting to cooperate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this train in as well and just let them both run at the same time until I'm happy that there's no issues. One of the reasons I do this, aside from making sure that the lighting works before I connect the two of them together, it also gives me an opportunity to make sure that, because they're independent trains, just to make sure that there's no problems, because if the wheels on this are a little dirty and it's not running at the same speed, or it's not quite run in as well as the other one, it can produce some problems. You'll have some pulling, because the two trains are basically working together, right? You have one pulling the other or pushing the other, so you're going to want to make sure that they're in tune. Alright, so what I'm going to do next is, like I said, is run this in. So we're going to power this up. It's going to look a little weird having the two blue Pullmans here. And you can see that even though I've got the speed set to the same, the one that's been running in for a few minutes is running a lot faster than the one that I just put on the track. So that's something to be alarmed about. It's going to happen just because the motor hasn't run in quite as much as the other. But like I said, you expect that to go away after running it in for about 5 or 10 minutes. And if it doesn't go away, then you may have a problem, and it gives you something to investigate, which is why I try to troubleshoot them as separate trains. We can see there the lights work fine on A, B, and C, and D, E, and F here are also working pretty well. I'm going to set the speed of both trains to the same. It's about 3 notches down, or at the 3 o'clock setting on the duets. Now these are on 2 separate duets, so even though they're the same power supply, it is being run independently, so hopefully there's no problems with my actual controller. It's something to keep in mind. If you do see a speed discrepancy even after it's warmed up, you may want to put them on the same controller and make sure that it's not an issue with the controller itself. But so far so good for today. It looks like both of these locomotives are running quite happily, and the A, B, and C part is picking up speed. Although there is a funny noise coming from it, so I may have to investigate that. Alright, so what we've discovered here, and this is one of the reasons why, like I said, we run them individually, is while the D and F part of the train is working fine, the A, B, and C is having a little bit of a problem. It's losing speed and cutting out. So maybe a problem with the DCC, or it could just be a pickup problem. So I'm going to go and take a quick look at the locomotive itself and see what's going on. But as you can see here, I've just got the power on, and it's deciding not to go anywhere, which is a bit of an issue. So like I said, it's one of the reasons why to take a look at this thing. See, it's dead as a doornail, and it's probably a loose connection or something like that, but we'll have to go and investigate. Basically, we run the trains independently so we can figure out if there's any issues. The D and F part is working fine. The A, B, and C, however, has developed a bit of an issue. It was running in for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then it started to slow down, and then just came to a grinding stop. I was able to leave it off for a few seconds and then throw the train into the opposite direction, and it still didn't do anything. So I went over to where it stopped, which was on the far side of the layout there. Some complicated point work, so I thought maybe it might be a issue with the pickups or something like that. So what I did was I just sort of manually slid it down past the point work, and then I threw it into reverse, and it sort of very gingerly came back over here. But now, like you saw a few seconds ago, it just isn't starting. So it's been off now for a couple of minutes. So we're going to see if it actually moves again when I apply power. So it's not moving again when I apply power. You can see the lights are coming on, but there's no actual movement of the train. So it could be a number of issues. I know that because I'm getting power, it's more likely not a issue at the pickup, since it would be getting power from the track. So the next thing I want to do is just make sure it isn't an issue with you know, some point work or something like that. So I'm going to go and wait for the other part of the train to move here. I'm just going to test to make sure that the track is working the way I expected. So I've got a Hornby Sentinel here. I'm just going to put the track at about 75% and touch the rails. And see there, not actually. Yeah, there it goes. Oops. Oh, look at that. So if the Sentinel is working fine, so I know it's not an issue with the track. But you saw there it started to move once I hit the thing with the Sentinel. So obviously there's some issue going on. So the first thing I normally do is apply some power to it, and then just gently, but with a little bit of force, tap the train, make sure that there's not a loose connection somewhere. Oh, look at that. It's decided to move. And now it stopped again. So I'm wondering if there may be an issue with the DCC decoder. So I'm manually pushing it, so it wasn't doing anything, but I saw it just want to move. I'm wondering if there's an issue with that. I saw the lights flicker intermittently, and then it decided to move, and then it stopped. So I'm thinking there's some issue with the some sort of loose connection here in this A module on the Loco itself. So I'm going to turn the power off. And we're going to go and just take a penknife here, and I'm going to stop the other train. So bring it around. I'm going to take a large blade of the penknife and use it to just flick the connection between the trains out, so I can disconnect it. We'll stop that one right there on the curve. So I'm going to take the penknife and just hopefully disconnect the train like that. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully you saw that. Basically I put it in between the hooks and just flicked it down. So the next thing we do is see if it actually runs on its own. Obviously you can see there that the power is off, so you don't have lights on that. But obviously it's not doing anything. Oh, look at that. So it's moving pretty slowly. And so I'm guessing that there's some kind of a connection issue. So next thing I'm going to do is just flick it over and see if the wheels are dirty or anything like that. So if I show you there, lighting's not so great, but the wheels don't look like they're in any great problem. It's obviously there's something going on there. Now these things are pretty tricky to open. Going to require opening it up on the workbench to see what's going on. but it does look like that there's some kind of contact issue. As you can see, it's intermittently moving along there. Now, sometimes you can get lucky and it'll just kind of kick out of it. So this one seems to be a little unhappy when it's running, so I'm going to go and take it apart and see what we can see is going on. Alright, so I took it apart, couldn't really find any problems. I did check, if you see right here, there's 2 screws that hold down the contacts. I did check to see if those were loose, and they were not, so that wasn't an issue there. But when I had it under the light, I did notice that the front wheels in particular, but also the back wheels, were not as clean as they looked. One of the problems with this part of the double rail layout is the lighting is a little poor. It's actually one of my next projects to work on. So what I'm going to do is give the wheels a good cleaning and see if that helps. So I'm going to use 91% rubbing alcohol. This is isopropyl alcohol, but it's basically rubbing alcohol. And I'm going to use a couple of Q-tips. So I'm going to go and do that real quick. I've done plenty of videos on that, and we'll see if that helps improve the running. So I just wanted to show you guys the technique I use to do this, and I'll try to do this on the camera if I can. So what I normally do, and it's going to be a little tricky to see, but basically there's 2 types of wheels on this particular Bachmann Pullman. You have the freewheeling ones that are not connected to the motor, and then you have the ones on the other end that are, so there's like limited movement. So you'll have to clean them, apply a little bit of power to track so they rotate halfway, and then clean it and kind of go around like that. But the other ones, the ones that are unpowered, are basically what we're going to tackle first. So I've actually cleaned these already, but I'm just going to show you what I did. So basically I took my thumb and place it on the opposite wheel on the axle, and then I'm just going to take this Q-tip with the rubbing alcohol on it and just rub it back and forth, and then I'm going to rotate with my thumb around so I can get to the next part, and then rotate around again so I can do that and rotate around again. Now since this is the second pass, you can see I'm not really getting anything off, so I'm going to go take the dry side of the Q-tip and basically dry the rubbing alcohol off of the wheel, and so on like that. Now I'm going to repeat this process with the opposite wheels and those as well, and then like I said, I will apply some power and see how that goes. Now one thing to be interesting about the way the contacts work on this is the old Hornby locos, the copper contacts would usually make contact with part of the wheel, usually on the inside of the wheel flange, but these actually make contact with, and it's kind of hard to see, but basically they make contact with the inside of the axle, actually the actual axle that goes across the center. So you have to look kind of inside here, and it's probably not going to come on the camera with the lighting here, but basically the copper contact touches the wheel, so it's even more important that the wheels are clean, because if the wheels aren't clean, these aren't going to make contact, whereas if the wheels aren't clean and you're touching the back of it, you still have more surface to make contact with. You're more than likely going to get away with dirtier wheels. But these, while they didn't look like they were too dirty, I remember I tapped the back of the Loco and it started to work a little bit. So the front wheels here weren't really that dirty. Got some dirt off, but nothing crazy. The back wheels, they looked okay under the kind of half lighting here, but as soon as I put it under the bright lights, I could see there's actually a very narrow, probably less than a millimeter band around where the flange here meets the inside of the wheel, and basically that was completely black. So I'm thinking, I'm hoping that that's the problem. So I've checked it out, and what I'm going to do next is just repeat what I just showed you with the remaining 3 wheels, and then we'll put it on the track and see if it has fixed the problem. Okay, so this is what I pulled off the wheels, and just to give you an idea, the lighter one, this one here in the middle, basically came off the front wheels, and then the other three were used to clean the rear wheels. And then you can see here, this is the end result after kind of cleaning it off. So you want to do it a few times until they come out basically looking pretty clean. Alright, so let's go see if that fixed the problem. So just a quick recap. The Loco is working okay. We split the thing in 2 parts just to see what was going on, make sure it hasn't been run for a while. The DEF part was working fine, so we'll just kick that back on, and it's running quite happily. The ABC part of the train was working okay. It was a little bit sluggish, and then as it started to warm up, it looked like it was okay, and all of a sudden it came to a grinding halt, as you saw. Still had power to the light, so figured it might or may not have been a pickup problem. Obviously, when we're getting lights, weren't getting any power, so I thought it might be a DCC decoder issue or anything like that. So one thing I did was by quick tap test to see if it's like maybe a loose connection or something like that. I didn't get much joy out of the front of the Loco. However, it did move intermittently with the rear of the Loco, and so I thought, well, maybe there's a loose connection or something like that. So used the penknife to disconnect the trains from each other, and then tapped some more. Didn't really, got some movement, but nothing great. I decided to take a look at it on the inside, make sure, since it hasn't been run for a while, do some maintenance, oil it up, and so on. That didn't help. It was when I didn't see anything crazy going on, but when I put it under the light on the workshop area, I did notice that there was a very slight dirty band around all 4 of the rear pickup wheels, and so I figured that may have been the cause. So it's all been put back together, it's been cleaned, got all, both bogies now are pretty clean. So what we're going to do is apply power to it and see if it actually runs. And you can see there, it's running very smoothly, as opposed to what it was doing before. And so I'm going to go and bring it back here and just go ahead and reconnect it to the train. To reconnect it, just simply, hopefully, we'll just let it clank together. I have to raise it up like that. I don't know if you saw that if my hand was in the way. But basically I just raised it up to clip it together. I'll show you if you missed it, just my arm was in the way. I will go ahead and do it to your train because I'm sure it's probably going to need cleaned as well. It's running okay, but now that I see the clean wheels, how smoothly this thing is running, I'm guessing its wheels probably are just as dirty. So we're going to fire this thing back up and run it in. And we're going to go ahead and stop the other train and do a little bit of wheel cleaning on it as well. Just to make sure that there isn't any other issues, we're going to run the ABC part of the train in for about 20-25 minutes, just to make sure that it's not a problem. Once both of them have been running okay for about 20-25 minutes, we will connect the 2 together and hopefully have a working Pullman. One thing you will notice, since I'm running them on 2 separate tracks, you'll notice I have one running one way and one running the other way. That's actually deliberate, so when I bring them over here and reconnect them on one of the other tracks, I don't have to pick the train up and move it around. It's going to be facing in the right direction. Alright, so I'm going to slow this one down and bring it to a halt right here in front of the camera, maybe. So it's a little bit too close to the camera, so I'm going to pull the camera back and continue recording. Okay, so just so you guys can see this, I've rigged up some temporary lighting here. We will get this improved for our next set of videos, but I'm going to go and just put the thing in there and just flip, and it should just come apart like so. And like I said, just using a standard Swiss Army knife and large blade, and it works pretty well. Alright, so what I'm going to do is take a look at this Loco's wheels, and these ones aren't as bad from the looks of it as the others, but you can see by it's pretty tricky to see because the lighting, even with this, is not that great, but you can see there's like a little black band. It's not quite as pronounced on this as it was on the other one, but I'm going to go ahead and clean this up anyway. Same technique as the other, and hopefully it'll get rolling. Alright, so give me a couple minutes to do that and we'll get back to it. Okay, so it turns out I pulled out a decent amount of dirt off of these wheels. You can see they look a little cleaner now. And one thing I wanted to point out is these wheels, and it's kind of hard to tell on the video here, but basically they're kind of tinted. They have a they're not the just shiny silver wheels. You've got that kind of weathered sort of kind of platinum almost, or titanium kind of look to them. And one thing that you'll dog here on that. One thing that you'll notice is that it's actually harder to tell if these wheels are dirty. I didn't think they were looked that dirty. They didn't look that dirty under the under this light, but under the bar light that I have for the workbench, I could see that once again it had a fair amount of dirt on it. This is what I picked off just as a set of wheels, so it's much dirtier than it actually looked. And so I guess that's the problem with some of the more modern Locos that have those nice looking tinted wheels, that they do apparently hide the dirt. Alright, so this has been cleaned up, and it's hopefully going to run. Like I said earlier when I cleaned the first one, I was going to show you guys how I reconnect these. Try to make it a little bit easier by doing it in front of the camera this time. So you see it just slides in on top of each other, so usually you can just you know, push, but you can see that it wants to bend downwards. So what I typically do is just lift up both ends, make sure it's properly aligned, and hopefully it'll cooperate. Sometimes it won't. Yeah, there it goes. So they can be a little fiddly, which is one of the reasons why I tend to just leave it assembled on the track. In fact, the double rail layout's been designed so that to accommodate some of these larger trains, and you just gotta make sure. Yeah, sorry, it's been designed to accommodate some of these larger trains so they don't have to be disassembled. You're probably gonna leave some fingerprints on the train, so you might want to clean it down afterwards when you're done with the cloth, so you don't leave any kind of oil residue on the Loco. But okay, so hopefully this will work okay. So I'm gonna go and power this thing back up, and hopefully it'll move, which it is not. There you go. So apparently it didn't connect properly, so let's try that again. There you go, clicked in properly that time. So it's make sure it's still on the track, make sure each of the bogies are happy. Just give it a bit of a push back and forth, and let's hopefully have it work this time. Yep, there you go. Alright, so I'm going to turn off the light here and let the camera readjust. You can see it is actually quite dark in this part of the layout. So I'm going to put the camera back where it was and let you guys get a few shots of it running in. But you can see there, it's working pretty good. So both trains appear to be working quite happily now. I've set them on the same power settings. So I'm going to give it about, like I said, 20-25 minutes, make sure there's no problems. I'll run individually as trains, and then we'll hook them back together and hopefully it'll still work. Alright, so you can see there it's running pretty smoothly. So what I'm going to do next is basically connect them back up. Before I do that, one thing I will do is I will run them individually around the layout just so that they're not making any weird noises. So what we'll do here is we'll just fire them off one at a time. And as long as I can't hear any strange noises coming out of them, I'm going to go ahead and connect them up. Obviously, if you hear any kind of strange noise, it's more than likely an axle or something like that needs oiled. So it's always a good idea to check that stuff out. Alright, so you can see here we've put back together the F, E, and D, and then we have C, B, and A. So it's all together and back and running smoothly in DC, which is quite good. So we'll go switch over the controllers to DCC here shortly and make sure it runs okay on DCC as well. But you can see it took a little bit of effort, but it's running smoothly, and turned out to be a pretty simple problem, just some dirty wheels causing some issues. But hopefully you figured out how to troubleshoot these slightly more complicated Bachmann Pullman locomotives. Alright, so that's it for today's Loco Works Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time.